Hi everybody, Beth here from Access Paranormal for this week's I Want to Know, which is all about paranormal investigating underwater. Has anyone thought about it? Has it been done? What would happen? What have people found? All that kind of interesting stuff. Now, this was a question that was sent through quite a while back, so thank you to the person who sent it through and your patience to finally got round to it. I think it's a fascinating topic, and I must admit, after doing a little bit of research myself, I found it to be really, I found it to be very, very interested because it is a completely different environment for obvious reasons. Hi everybody. Hi. So there is, to cut a long story short, there is a team that actually has done it or has been doing it. But I'll talk about that a bit later. But I thought it'd be interesting to look at the really obvious differences, but the ones that may not be so obvious as well, about trying to look at investigating underwater with scuba diving as opposed to being up here in land, and investigating locations up here as well. Hi Vicky, hey Tina. So the first thing I'll mention, I mean, let's think about it. It's a fascinating topic. Trying to control the environment would be the first thing I think logistically would be a real issue. It's difficult enough sometimes being outside in sort of bushland or a forest or something like that. Hi everybody, hey Shane, hi Karina. You know, that's going to be the logistics of it there. You know, we have to be wary of what's around us at the time if we're outside a location. Sometimes even being in a building, if there's a couple of other vigils going on, sometimes that can be difficult to control. So then you think about it being underwater, and that's a whole other ball game. I mean, you know, sorry shark, can you move out the way of just doing an EVP session? Like, it just doesn't work. You know, you're so much more open to the elements out there in the ocean than you would be, I would think, so on land too. So that's the first thing. I think controlling the environment would be very, very, very difficult to you. Very, very vulnerable to the elements like that. And remember, if this is actually an investigation of possible paranormal activity, it's also being done in the dark. So, and I know with our torches and flashlights, when we're investigating, we get some of an idea, but imagine that in pitch black. So again, that's another completely different environmental thing to think about. You've got the sound of water swooshing around or your ears and all that sort of stuff. Now, I haven't been scuba diving before. One day I'd like to get over my fear of something happening if I was to ever scuba dive, but I think I would love it once you're in there. It's like, from what I've heard, it's amazing. If you have actually been scuba diving, let me know also in the comments too. That'd be really awesome. And give your feedback on your thoughts on what it would be like if you were able to investigate a particular location too. So there's that as well. Hi Di, how are you, sweetie? So that's the first thing. The environment would be really, really difficult to try and control, more so than it would be if we were on land, purely because you're just so much at the element. I also think that the time restrictions would be much shorter. So say, for instance, you're hiring a venue, it's from 10 till 4, or, you know, if you're doing a private case and you're there for overnight and that's it. That's your set time. But I think with scuba diving it'd be a much, much shorter time frame, so you'd have to really know your stuff, where we're suiting up, we're getting down there, we've got to get to the location, we've got to get as much as we can and then head back up, because remember, our bodies aren't meant to be underwater, so there'd be certain time restrictions of how long we're meant to be there. And also there's oxygen tank stuff and all that sort of thing, I could imagine. So time restrictions, I think it'd be a lot more, you'd have to really be on the game and have it really planned out, I would say. There's also the possibility of all the health and safety issues with that. So you think public liability insurance is enough? Holy moly, I can only imagine what it would be like from the health and safety perspective of having your team scuba diving to find possible paranormal activity. I can imagine that would just be a whole kettle of fish, excuse the pun, you know, going through something like that too. So you'd have to make sure that you have all the right checks in place, that everyone's had the right training for it, that everything is certified, the equipment you're using to keep yourself alive while you're underwater is all that kind of stuff. So I imagine all that would be on par. But then again, that's that whole level of safety and health and safety that would be included, that would normally be there for a normal traditional paranormal investigation on land. Then, of course, there's all the audible and visual stuff. So I'm fascinated by the possibility of whether or not the same types of apparitions or you know, residual hauntings or intelligent hauntings could actually be happening underwater as it would on land. Now, for obvious reasons, you know, water is a conductor of energy, so maybe does that enhance things or does it make it difficult? Does it cause more resistance for something to possibly manifest? It's, oh my God, the mind boggles. So That's the first thing as well. And as I said, from an audible perspective, it'd be really interesting too, because sound is actually a lot faster in water. I think from memory, it's about 5 times faster. Don't quote me on that. And so again, you know, you're almost getting it real time, you know, or traveling from much further distances from what you're hearing. So it's just incredible the types of things that you could possibly see. Whether, you know, do shadow people exist underwater? Does poltergeist activity exist underwater? I mean, oh my God, you know, demonic possession. Hello, like it's all these different things. You know, could that happen under there? Could there be a spot or a place or a way? So just fascinating stuff. So things to think about. You know, the differences with investigating underwater. Would it be any different to would it be on land? Then, of course, there's finding locations for you to investigate. That would be really interesting too. So often it's a lot easier on land, but because people will come and mention, or you will hear about stories that someone's had about a particular place, less people scuba dive. It's like narrowed right down. So it'd be hard to find legitimate witness stories and experiences about scuba divers having paranormal experiences than you would for any person sort of in a building or anywhere else in the world. So I think that would narrow right down to trying to understand or at least find sort of cases you could work on, really. So I think from a private case perspective, it would probably almost be non-existent, but not completely non-existent, but almost non-existent. But then you've got your public cases, so you obviously public locations, so you'd have to find where wreckages were, or please don't go to Bermuda Triangle, I heard people get lost, but you know, places where World War II planes have gone down, or there's been a bridge accident and there's been deaths there, and or you know, all different types of like places where tragedy has happened and death has actually happened. Now, of course, as we do know as investigators, we need to keep in mind that we are very tactful in those particular situations, that there are places we don't go investigate because of the fact there's a recent history there. So keep that in mind too. If this is something you may have the wonderful opportunity to be able to do, if you do, I would love to know. But yeah, keep in mind that we need to be tactful of those that are still alive in those situations, which most of us do. But again, I think it also carries on to anything underwater as well. But I would think that the whole finding places that could have possible activity would be very narrowed down as well. And keep in mind too, we're not used to the environment. Like, we're not used to being underwater all the time for obvious reasons. So things that might seem really unusual and possibly paranormal could possibly really be easily explained, more so than what it would be if we're on land here as well. So obviously we're up here, we're used to, you know, the sounds of a roof popping or banging because the temperature drops, all that kind of thing. But then we're not used to anything that could be easily explained as much underwater, because we're not in that environment all the time. It's only short pockets and only certain people too. So that's also another thing to keep in mind as well. One thing I thought was interesting too is that, you know, it's not just the whole spirit side of it, but there's also almost like the marine cryptozoology side of it too. So, I mean, I read somewhere that we have only, human eyes only seen 5% of the ocean. So 95% is completely unexplored. So you can only imagine and think, holy moly, how many creatures will be in caves all around this great, beautiful planet that have never seen the light of day and probably never will. And they've been there for millions of years and can just give those clues to how the planet was actually formed. But imagine possibly coming across something like that. Now, it's highly unlikely if you're going to be in semi-populated areas or even just a little bit of a remote area. But you never know. So even just things like that, so creatures that you'd never see before, that possibility of seeing that, and mind boggles, you know, completely because of that possibility. Excuse me. Now, there is a team that does do this. You can go check them out. They are only on Facebook. They are called Paranormal Divers. They're based in Florida, and it's headed by a guy called Lee Ehrlich. I think he says he's been doing it for almost about 10 years. I think he dives a lot on his own or with his own business or something along the lines of that. So he's got all the kit, he's got everything going on, and they've been doing it for a while. So go and head over to their Facebook page and check it out. There's another thing that also I found was quite interesting too, is when it comes to paranormal equipment, so paranormal investigating equipment. How would that work underwater? Yeah, so EMF detector, not working. You know what I mean? Static detector, get out. So, you know, you'd have to completely redesign all your paranormal equipment to be able to get into that environment and use it. Now, of course, there's video cameras, which is a given. So there's obviously sealed, waterproof video cameras or actual still cameras. But I think one of the things that Lee from Paranormal Divers has actually, I thought either he's created it or he's helped create it, but it's the very first drone sonar built specifically for audible recordings. I think that's how it was. So it's catching EVPs, apparently. He has a video on his Facebook page, which you should, if you want to go and check it out. So he talks a bit about it. But it's the only one that's been built for that particular thing. So I thought that was really interesting, particularly because the way that sound travels underwater as well. So again, it would be something you would think, well, I'd have to redesign everything. I have to kind of start from scratch. Or is there ways around you could do this? So fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. So go check it out. There's also, I'll post a link to a photo that they have claimed is the first underwater ghost photo. Now, I always take these with a grain of salt, but I'll post it anyway. I'd love to know what you think of it as well. But again, they've got all different videos here and there. I think they might even have a YouTube channel as well, but go check it out. Paranormal Divers. Hey, Nikki, awesome. So you go check it out, and yeah, let me know your experiences. Have you been scuba diving? What are your thoughts? Did you think it could happen? I mean, I've watched some videos with people scuba diving, and there's all the swishing and the water and stuff. So to me, that would be something that after a while you'd have to get used to, and you have to be understand that that's a common sound that you would hear while you're navigating through your environment. So lots of interesting things to think about. But anyway, use the comment section down below. I'd love to see what you have to say. Until next week.